These days we're seeing a lot of stock linears perform amazing straight out of the box, but can this stock linear match those same claims without factory lube? Let's get into it. I'm gonna just say right now, these Panera drinks are so good. Just caffeine. I'm gonna be honest, the Pearlios have been sitting in my closet for a hot minute now because I wasn't expecting anything like too competitive from Zeal in the linear market, especially because they spent most of their hype on the clickies, as well as there just being an overflood of linear switches nowadays. Anyways, yesterday I was going through my switches and I decided to try them, and that's when I knew I needed to make this video. These are insanely smooth. I'm just gonna say it right now. Just take a listen. That was stock. On top of that, these aren't even factory lubed, which is kind of important when you're thinking of the best stock linears that are out right now. The Epsilons, the Oil Kings, and the Ducks. Those are all factory lubed, which is great, but it also adds the possibility of a QC issue where you might have an overlube or an underlube on a batch, or even the occasional switch with no lube at all. The Pearlios, on the other hand, are ready to go straight from the bag. Not only did I notice the smoothness of each switch, but also the consistency of which all switches were uniformly smooth. Buying switches that are pre-lubed sometimes leads to an uneven lube job, and it's not out of the ordinary to find 1 or 2 rotten tomatoes within the mix. While all 70 of my Pearlios were basically indistinguishable from one another. The stem wobble on these are minimal to none with the new Gateron cap housings, and there's no leaf ping at all. The sound profile, although not as deep and thocky as mainstream linears, are noticeably less chirpy than Tealios and bearable at the very least. There's no fancy stage spring or long pull stem here. The Pearlios do come with a slightly longer spring than normal switches, which increases the starting weight, but only very slightly. The stem is umwipe, the top is PC, and the bottom is nylon. Zeal claims that the stem rails as well as the bottom housings are polished, which may contribute to the reason why the Pearlios are so smooth out of the box. Taking a look inside the switch, you can indeed tell that they are polished by the reflective nature of their rails. Now, it is possible to polish switches yourself. TofuTypes did a tutorial kind of on how to diamond polish your switches, and I'll link it down below, but it does take a lot of effort as well as equipment and time and noise complaints to do. Normally, to break in switches, you either have to use them over a period of a few years or just put them inside a switch break-in machine and run it for a few days, which is still a lot of effort. Polishing the rails is basically a glorified way of breaking in the switches by applying polish inside the rails before running it in the switch break-in machine and then washing it off afterwards. This method provides a similar feel to how Gateron, Zeal's manufacturer, is pre-breaking in the Pearlios straight from the factory. Now, although polishing the rails does greatly improve performance, it is only part of the puzzle. For more insight, we have to take a look at some other switches that are also polished as well. Along with the Pearlios, Gateron has released a few other switches recently that utilize the same polishing technology and are quite popular as well.
Y'all need to get into the drip like a piranha. Y'all need to get into my drip like y'all need water. I mean, it's only head to toe, Balenciaga. I mean, y'all bitches better y'all like Ariana if they ever tryna knock up.
Alright, so this is the Gateron X, and it is very similar to the Pearlio. They're both manufactured by Gateron, use polished rails, and have a nylon bottom. The Gateron X, well, to its credit, is still relatively smooth out of the box, is missing a few things that the Pearlio has. On top of the housing constraints and spring quality, the crucial ingredient that the Pearlio has is a polished umwipe stem, and because of that, the Gateron X stumbles short of the finish line and still greatly benefits from lube. The Gateron CJ is another switch that has polished rails and is unlubed. While a bit more expensive than the Gateron X and geared towards enthusiasts, they're much more buttery in their stock form. In this switch, Gateron is using a palm stem as well as a palm bottom. They come very, very close, but in my opinion, the Pearlios still slightly edge them out in smoothness yet again. Now, although the Pearlios don't get any smoother from lube or film, you're still welcome to lube them. Like, it makes the sound signature a little deeper and also quieter, which is pretty nice. It's nice to have the choice between a brighter sound signature and something that's a little bit more dark. Just be aware that these switches are actually so smooth that it actually makes the switch a little scratchier if you lube it. You can bag lube the springs though, because I did notice that there's a little bit of spring scratch, but it's only audible if you like hold it up really close to your ear, and you're definitely not going to hear it in your keyboard unless you put your head like 2 centimeters away from where you're typing, which is just impractical. And why are you even doing that? No, stop. But alas, we're talking about Zeal here, so there's always that big asterisk of pricing. And this time, I don't think that there's an excuse. At $140 per switch, these cost more than some Franken switches. And I'm not talking about those peasant double switch Franks. These cost more than some triple switch Franks plus the spring swap, which is kind of crazy and impressive if you think about it. Beginners definitely ain't gonna go for these. And enthusiasts, well, they already know how to lube. Not only do they know how to lube, they also know the amount to apply to get the sound and feel that they prefer, which is ultimately what matters most. And the really transcendent enthusiasts, well, they've already entered a state of heightened existence and reconciled with the scratch. Hey, that's why MX Flex are goated. I'm gonna just say it right now. It all comes back around. I mentioned before that the sound profile of the Pearlios aren't as obnoxious as the Tealios, but I still do think that the sound of the upstroke hitting the PC top housing is very cheap, plasticky, and generally unpleasant. I swapped out the top housing for an MX Black because, well, MX Blacks are goated, and it sounds much, much better. But then again, if you're adding an MX Black to the mix, your Franken switch is closing in on almost $2 at that point, which is just way too much to pay for any switch. The baseline is at $140 per switch. The Pearlios better come ready to make you come, and sadly, that hasn't happened yet. I get it, this switch is the smoothest stock experience I've had, but it doesn't matter if the sound signature is subpar to what I personally like. The Pearlios are simply too expensive to compete with beginner switches and are easily matched by higher end switches when lubed by an enthusiast. They could have really stirred up a lot of attention if they were priced at half. That's still a little too much, maybe like 2/5 of their original price. The reason why you see so much talk about the CJ and the Gateron X is that they actually play viable roles in the consumer economy. The Gateron X is a 49-cent switch and serves as a bridge between the budget milky yellows and more expensive options. And the CJ at 65 cents brings you 90% of the way to the Pearlio and quickly becomes an endgame after lube and film. It also offers a cheaper alternative to premium switches like the black inks. Speaking of which, the inks are like 75 cents a switch, which is already pretty expensive, but they get absolutely dwarfed by the Pearlios. There's always a part of me that always wants to chase the smoothest linear experience, but when I finally achieve it, I feel kind of empty inside. A switch that goes from point A to point B with zero resistance is kind of dull, not gonna lie. And when the journey goes as smoothly as this switch, it does kind of make me yearn for something with a little bit more resistance, such as the MX Blacks. So unless your money don't jiggle jiggle, it folds, I probably can't see you wiggle wiggle this switch into your budget. That's for sure. That was so cringy, what the fuck, dude?
You just wanna party, you just wanna lap dance, you just wanna pop up on these cons like you the Batman. You just wanna ball out in designer with your best friends. You don't wanna talk no more about it in the past tense. Get me out my zone, I'm just talking comfort, shoddy. I ain't give you nothing, you got comfort, shoddy. I got plenty things you make a run for, shoddy. Call him Ed Sheeran, he in love with my body.